Eleanor Ellie Vance stood before the self-appointed council of the Sterling family, the weight of generations of Boston Brahmin power pressing down from the mahogany-paneled walls of her Uncle Arthur's imposing office overlooking the Common. Freshly armed with an MBA from Harvard Business School and a meticulously researched proposal, she felt a familiar knot tighten in her stomach, a blend of nervous energy and the ingrained knowledge that acceptance in this room was granted, never earned, especially for her. Arthur Sterling, patriarch of the family and iron-fisted CEO of Sterling Industries, sat behind his massive antique desk, radiating impatience. Beside him, her Aunt Beatrice Sterling adjusted the cuff of her St. John suit, her expression one of polite, bored tolerance. Flanking them were Ellie's cousins. Charlie Sterling, already a vice president in the family's finance division, despite his unremarkable track record, wore his usual smirk. William Sterling, currently coasting through Harvard Law, looked openly dismissive. They were the chosen heirs, the undisputed future of the Sterling Empire. Ellie, daughter of Arthur's estranged, less successful younger brother, was merely a peripheral figure, expected to be decorative and deferential, but Ellie had a plan that was anything but deferential. She laid out her vision for Phoenix Capital, a lean, agile private equity fund designed to identify undervalued, struggling mid-sized companies, particularly in manufacturing and legacy industries across New England, and revitalize them through strategic investment, operational expertise, and, crucially, ethical management practices. Her presentation was data-driven, passionate, highlighting market opportunities Sterling Industries, with its focus on aggressive, often predatory acquisitions, consistently overlooked. When she finished, silence hung heavy in the air, broken only by Arthur Sterling clearing his throat dismissively. "Eleanor, my dear," he began, his tone laced with condescension, "quite ambitious. A commendable academic exercise." He steepled his fingers. "But finance, real finance, the kind that built this city and this family, requires a certain fortitude, a level of detachment perhaps unsuited to your temperament. Sterling Industries handles acquisitions, large-scale ones. This niche turnaround work." He waved a dismissive hand. "Arthur is right, dear." Beatrice chimed in smoothly, her smile not reaching her eyes. "Such complex matters are best left to the men. Your energies would be far better spent volunteering for the Symphony Gala Committee, or perhaps focusing on finding a suitable young man. Stability, Eleanor, that's what matters." Charlie snickered. "Phoenix Capital. Sounds rather quaint. Maybe started as a non-profit, Ellie? A nice charitable hobby?" William stifled a yawn. The rejection was absolute, patronizing, steeped in the casual misogyny and entrenched nepotism that defined the Sterling dynasty. Ellie felt a familiar surge of hot anger, quickly masked by years of practiced composure learned at countless Sterling family gatherings. She met her uncle's dismissive gaze, then her cousin's smirks, holding her posture erect. "Thank you for your time, Uncle Arthur, Aunt Beatrice, Charlie, William," she said, her voice cool and even. "I appreciate your perspective." She gathered her presentation materials with deliberate slowness, refusing to let them see how deeply the casual cruelty had landed. As she walked out of the opulent office, the weight of their dismissal settled not as defeat, but as fuel. Later that afternoon, she met her mother, Catherine Vance, at a small, unassuming cafe in Back Bay, far removed from the Sterling stronghold of Beacon Hill. Catherine, who had divorced Arthur's brother years ago and maintained a careful distance from the Sterling clan, listened patiently, her expression a mixture of sadness and resignation. "Oh, Ellie," Catherine sighed, stirring her tea. "I told you they wouldn't understand. They haven't changed since your father tried to propose his own independent venture. Anything outside their control, especially from someone they deem peripheral, is seen as a threat or foolish fancy." She reached across the table, squeezing Ellie's hand. "But I believe in you. Your father would have been so proud of this idea." Catherine offered more than just moral support. She offered the remainder of Ellie's modest inheritance from her father. "It's not Sterling money," she said wryly, "but it's yours. Use it wisely. Prove them wrong, darling, but please." Her eyes held a warning, and be careful. Arthur doesn't tolerate competition, perceived or real, especially from within the family. That night, Ellie made her decision. She wouldn't just prove them wrong. She would do it so completely, so decisively, that they would never see it coming until it was too late. Phoenix Capital would rise, but it would do so in absolute secrecy. The first step was creating the cover. After weeks of careful consideration, she landed on the perfect camouflage. Ellie Vance, using her full first name to create distance, research analyst at a mid-tier financial data aggregation firm downtown. It was respectable enough to mention at family gatherings, but sufficiently dull to deflect any real interest or scrutiny. She purchased a wardrobe of conservative, forgettable suits and blouses, perfected a demeanor of quiet diligence, and secured the position. Simultaneously, Phoenix Capital was born in the shadows. Ellie rented a cramped, drafty office above a noisy bookstore in Cambridge, paying cash month to month. Using layers of incorporation services and burner phones, she established the legal entity. Her first key hire was Chloe Jones, a brilliant financial analyst Ellie knew from taking her MBA study group, someone equally underestimated by the old boys network, fiercely loyal and willing to gamble on Ellie's vision and her discretion. The first year was a brutal grind. Ellie worked her mind-numbing 9-to-5 cover job, fetching coffee and running database queries for condescending mid-level managers, meticulously maintaining her disguise. Evenings and weekends were consumed by Phoenix Capital, endless hours spent in the tiny Cambridge office with Chloe, analyzing potential deals, building financial models, cold calling skeptical lenders, surviving on cheap takeout and sheer determination. Secrecy was paramount, paranoia a constant companion. Every email was encrypted, every meeting held in nondescript locations, every document shredded. Their first breakthrough came nearly 8 months in. A small third-generation textile mill in Lowell, Massachusetts, drowning in debt and facing imminent closure. The owner, worn down and distrustful after being rejected by traditional banks, agreed to meet mostly out of desperation. Ellie and Chloe spent weeks on site, immersing themselves in the mill's operations, renegotiating supplier contracts, finding niche export markets, implementing lean and inventory controls, and securing a small bridge loan from a credit union impressed by Ellie's turnaround plan. It was exhausting, painstaking work. But 6 months later, the mill posted its first quarterly profit in years. It was a small victory, almost invisible on the larger financial landscape. But sitting in the cramped Cambridge office late one night, sharing lukewarm pizza with Chloe, Ellie allowed herself a small, fierce smile. Phoenix Capital was real. It worked. And the Sterlings, comfortably ensconced in their Beacon Hill mansions and financial district towers, hadn't noticed a thing. The game, the very long game, was officially on. Nearly a decade bled into the next, each year measured in the careful calibration of Ellie Vance's 2 meticulously crafted realities. Phoenix Capital, born in defiant secrecy, shed its cramped Cambridge skin. It now operated from a discreet full-floor suite high in a gleaming financial district tower. No nameplate adorned the lobby directory. Access required navigating a specific bank of elevators using key cards programmed with expiring credentials. Inside, a small elite team, specialists in operational turnarounds, leveraged finance, and corporate law, each rigorously vetted and bound by draconian non-disclosure agreements, worked with intense, quiet focus. They were the engine of Ellie's hidden empire. Meanwhile, Ellie Vance, research analyst, continued her unremarkable trajectory at FinData Analytics, a mid-sized firm whose sheer blandness provided excellent camouflage. Ellie had mastered the art of competent mediocrity. She arrived on time, completed her assigned tasks diligently, if without notable flair, participated politely in tedious team meetings, and received performance reviews consistently marking her as meeting expectations. Her colleagues viewed her as quiet, reliable, perhaps a bit shy, certainly not someone harboring ambitions beyond her carefully defined low-level role. Her modest apartment in Somerville, her sensible wardrobe, her avoidance of flashy networking events, all meticulously curated to reinforce the image of a woman living a quiet, unassuming life on a research analyst's salary. Maintaining this duality was a constant, exhausting tightrope walk. The mental whiplash between commanding multi-million-dollar negotiations for Phoenix Capital in the evenings and enduring condescending explanations of basic database functions from her FinData manager the next morning required immense discipline. Isolation became her default state. Close friendships were a luxury the secret couldn't afford. Her mother, Catherine, remained her steadfast, albeit largely uninformed anchor. Their weekly phone calls a lifeline to normalcy, though Ellie could only share vague updates about her challenging analyst job. Chloe Jones, her first hire and now COO of Phoenix Capital, became more than just a colleague. She was Ellie's co-conspirator, confidant, and the only other person who truly understood the immense pressure and exhilarating thrill of their shared secret. There were close calls, moments when the meticulously constructed walls threatened to crumble. Once, having lunch at a discreet restaurant near South Station with the nervous CEO of a potential Phoenix acquisition target, Ellie looked up to see Arthur Sterling himself striding in with Charlie for a power lunch, seating themselves only a few tables away. Ellie felt her blood run cold. She quickly adopted her most invisible persona, hunching slightly, avoiding eye contact, murmuring an excuse to her lunch companion about feeling unwell, and making a hasty retreat before her uncle or cousin could possibly recognize the unambitious niece eavesdropping on high-level business discussions. The near miss left her shaken for days, reinforcing the need for constant vigilance. Yet within the secure walls of Phoenix Capital, Ellie Vance was a force of nature. She possessed an uncanny ability to diagnose the underlying rot in struggling companies, coupled with the financial acumen to structure complex rescue packages and the operational insight to implement difficult turnaround plans. Phoenix didn't just offer advice. It took controlling stakes, injected capital tied to strict performance metrics, often replaced entrenched management, and actively guided companies back to health. Their methodology was rigorous, data-driven, and ethically grounded. A stark contrast to Sterling Industries' typical slash-and-burn acquisition model focused on short-term asset stripping. Phoenix's reputation grew quietly but powerfully within specific circles. Turnaround specialists, bankruptcy lawyers, desperate CEOs who had exhausted traditional options. They became known as the anonymous White Knight Fund that could achieve the impossible, often stepping in just as a company teetered on the brink, sometimes directly thwarting acquisition attempts by larger, more predatory players. Frequently, though unknown to the wider market, Sterling Industries itself. The case of Chen Tech became a defining example, whispered about in Boston tech circles. David Chen's innovative hardware company, once a local success story, was struggling with cash flow issues and outdated management practices. Sterling Industries began circling, smelling blood, applying pressure through shared suppliers, and making deliberately lowball acquisition offers designed to force a desperate sale. Mr. Chen was resisting, but running out of options. Through discreet back channels, Chloe Jones made contact. Ellie met David Chen late one evening, not as a Sterling niece, but as the anonymous principal of Phoenix Capital. She presented not just a lifeline, but a partnership. Phoenix wouldn't just buy debt, they would invest equity, contingent on Chen, implementing a radical operational overhaul Ellie's team had devised. They proposed pivoting Chen Tech for consumer peripherals to a high-margin niche in specialized components for the aerospace and medical device industries, leveraging Chen's core patents in a new direction. They offered bridge financing, expertise in renegotiating supply chains away from Sterling-influenced vendors, and access to new customer networks. It was a gamble for Chen, requiring immense trust in an unknown entity. But faced with the certainty of being dismantled by Sterling Industries, he agreed. Over the next 6 months, Phoenix Capital worked intensely alongside Chen's team. Ellie personally oversaw the financial restructuring. Chloe managed the operational pivot. They secured new contracts, streamlined production, and refinanced debt on favorable terms. Arthur Sterling, anticipating Chen Tech's imminent collapse, was blindsided when the company suddenly stabilized, announced a major new contract in the aerospace sector, and issued a press release about a successful private strategic recapitalization by an undisclosed investment group committed to long-term New England innovation. Arthur was reportedly furious, unable to identify the source of the funding that had snatched his prey away. This scenario repeated itself several times over the years, frustrating Sterling Industries' expansion plans and solidifying Phoenix Capital's clandestine reputation as the bane of predatory acquirers. Each successful turnaround, each company saved from the Sterling grasp, was a quiet victory for Ellie, reinforcing her original purpose. But the decade of deception took its toll. The constant vigilance, the sacrificed personal life, the gnawing loneliness. It was a heavy price. Yet watching the Sterling Empire continue its ruthless march, fueled by the arrogance that had dismissed her years ago, only strengthened her resolve. The long game required patience, sacrifice, and unwavering focus. Her moment, the one she had been meticulously planning for 10 years, was getting closer. The annual Sterling Family Charitable Foundation Gala, held with predictable opulence in Arthur and Beatrice's sprawling Beacon Hill mansion, was an event Ellie Vance usually endured with practiced invisibility. She navigated the glittering crowd, a sea of old Boston money, bespoke suits, and heirloom jewelry, clad in her carefully chosen armor. A simple, elegant, but deliberately unremarkable charcoal gray sheath dress that screamed competent administrative staff, not heiress or threat. For 10 years, she had perfected this role at family gatherings. Ellie Vance, research analyst, the quiet niece, the one who worked diligently at some obscure data firm downtown. She accepted mineral water from passing waiters, offered polite, brief answers when cornered, and generally faded into the expensive wallpaper just as expected. "Eleanor, darling, how lovely you could tear yourself away from your spreadsheets," Aunt Beatrice trilled, intercepting her near the elaborate floral centerpiece. Her smile was brittle, her eyes scanning Ellie's simple dress with faint disapproval. "Still enjoying that little data firm?" "It keeps me busy, Aunt Beatrice," Ellie replied with a small neutral smile. Later, her cousin Charlie, flushed with importance after recently being named head of a minor Sterling Industries subsidiary, cornered her by the overloaded buffet table. "Good to see you, Ellie," he said, already looking past her towards more influential guests. "Things going well at FinData, wasn't it? Listen, if you ever want a real challenge, maybe we could find a spot for you in marketing coordination back at Sterling. Help manage the charity ball invites, something like that." He delivered the offer with the magnanimous air of someone bestowing a great favor. "Thank you, Charlie. I'll keep that in mind," Ellie murmured, deftly sidestepping before he could elaborate. His condescension, once a source of burning humiliation, now felt almost amusingly predictable. 10 years. A billion-dollar firm built in secret, and they still saw her as the girl who needed help managing invitations. Her purpose tonight wasn't social interaction. It was reconnaissance and confirmation. She needed to gauge Arthur Sterling's current frustration level regarding the company's Phoenix capital had quietly shielded from his grasp. Positioning herself near a brocade-covered sofa where her uncle held court with Charlie, William, and 2 senior Sterling executives, Ellie feigned interest in a nearby landscape painting. Their conversation, fueled by expensive scotch, soon turned, as she anticipated, to recent business setbacks. Arthur Sterling's voice was tight with controlled anger. "And then Chen Tech, right out from under us. Should have been a simple acquisition. Distressed assets, perfect fit for the aerospace division expansion. And then this damned ghost fund steps in." "Phoenix Capital," Charlie supplied, swirling his drink. "Nobody knows who runs it. Completely opaque. They operate through layers of lawyers, refuse direct meetings. Arrogant bastards." "Their timing is impeccable, I'll give them that," one of the executives conceded grimly. "They stabilized Chen just weeks before we could trigger the loan covenants." Arthur slammed his glass down on the antique side table with a sharp crack. "Arrogant or not, we need Chen's patents for the aerospace contracts. The board is demanding results. Since outright acquisition failed, we pivot to a merger. Chen's board, however, is insisting on approval from their primary investors, this Phoenix Capital." He scoffed. "They hold the controlling debt and equity now, damn them. We have no choice but to engage this phantom CEO directly." He turned to William, his tone sharp. "Instruct Harrington and Sloan first thing tomorrow. Formally request an urgent meeting with the CEO of Phoenix Capital. Route it through Chentech's counsel. Offer whatever preliminary concessions are necessary to get them in a room. We need the Chentech integration and finalize this quarter." Standing by the painting, Ellie kept her expression placid, betraying nothing of the electrifying surge of adrenaline that shot through her. They took the bait. After a decade of patient strategic maneuvering of operating in the deepest shadows, Arthur Sterling was demanding a face-to-face meeting. He was walking directly into the arena she had spent 10 years building. The years of enduring their dismissals, the lonely stress of her double life, the calculated risks. It was all converging on this single, inevitable confrontation. A cold, fierce anticipation settled within her. She made her excuses and left the gala early, the forced pleasantries and stifling atmosphere suddenly unbearable. Back in the quiet anonymity of her functional Somerville apartment, a far cry from the Sterling mansions, she checked her encrypted communications channel. A message from Chloe Jones, timestamped just minutes earlier. SR Sterling request via CTC, Chentech Council. Confirmed. Formal request for meeting CEO to CEOs of Chentech merger. Location requested, PHXHQ. Urgency emphasized. They are hooked, awaiting your instructions. A rare, sharp smile touched Ellie's lips. She spent the next day meticulously planning. She instructed Chloe to accept the meeting request, scheduling it for 3 days hence, 9 a.m. sharp, in Phoenix Capital's main boardroom, the largest, most impressive room, overlooking the heart of Boston's financial district. She reviewed Phoenix's complete portfolio, identifying every point of leverage, every sterling competitor Phoenix had strengthened, every potential vulnerability within Sterling Industries itself that her firm's market intelligence had uncovered. She assembled a concise but devastating presentation deck, not just about Chen Tech, but showcasing Phoenix Capital's true market power, influence, and financial clout. Finally, she considered her wardrobe. The sensible suits of Ellie Vance, research analyst, were pushed to the back of the closet. For this meeting, she needed armor. She chose a bespoke pantsuit in deep charcoal gray by a designer whose name even Beatrice Sterling would recognize. Minimalist, authoritative, impeccably tailored. The transformation wasn't just about revealing her identity. It was about stepping fully into the power she had painstakingly built in secret. The invisible CEO was preparing her entrance. The morning of the meeting arrived, crisp and bright over Boston Harbor. Ellie Vance arrived at the discreet, unmarked entrance to Phoenix Capital's financial district headquarters, not as Eleanor the research analyst, but as the founder and CEO she truly was. Gone was the sensible, forgettable attire. Today she wore a bespoke charcoal gray pantsuit that radiated quiet authority, her demeanor poised and centered. Chloe Jones met her at the private elevator, tablet in hand. "They're confirmed, Ellie," Chloe reported, her usual calm professionalism tinged with anticipation. "Arthur, Beatrice, Charlie, and William. ETA 8:55 a.m. Conference room Alpha is prepped. Presentation loaded." "Any last-minute intelligence?" Ellie asked, stepping into the elevator. "Just chatter from Chen Tech's counsel, confirming the Sterlings are extremely eager, almost desperate to secure this meeting. They believe they hold all the cards regarding the merger valuation," Chloe relayed with a faint smile. "Excellent," Ellie replied. "Let them." At precisely 8:55 a.m., the Sterling delegation swept into the elegant minimalist reception area of Phoenix Capital. Arthur Sterling led the way, exuding impatience. Beatrice followed, examining the modern art on the walls with a critical air, seemingly unimpressed. Charlie and William trailed behind, projecting an aura of bored entitlement. Their subtle glances around the unexpectedly upscale, though deliberately understated office hinted at a slight confusion. This wasn't the scrappy startup headquarters they might have envisioned. They were shown into conference room Alpha, a large state-of-the-art room dominated by a massive teak table and floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views. Arthur, without invitation, immediately moved towards the chair at the head of the table. Ellie waited in her adjacent office until precisely 9 a.m. She took one final deep breath, smoothed her jacket, and walked into the conference room. Silence fell instantly. All four Sterlings turned, their expressions shifting rapidly from impatience to utter bewilderment. It was Beatrice who broke the stunned silence, her voice sharp with ingrained expectation. "Eleanor? What on earth are you doing in here? This is a private meeting. And where is the coffee? We've been waiting." Charlie smirked, recovering slightly. "Lost your way from the admin pool, Ellie." "This is the executive floor." Arthur Sterling frowned, his legendary impatience flaring. "Eleanor, this is highly inappropriate. We are here for a critical negotiation with the CEO of Phoenix Capital. Please locate him immediately and inform him we have arrived." Ellie didn't reply immediately. She walked deliberately past the chairs where Kikazamunderika, her cousin, sat gaping past her aunt's indignant stare, directly to the other head of the table, the seat directly opposite her uncle. She stood there for a moment, commanding the space, meeting Arthur's incredulous, reddening face. "I don't fetch coffee anymore, Aunt Beatrice," Ellie stated, her voice perfectly calm, perfectly modulated, carrying easily in the suddenly silent room. She pulled out the high-backed leather executive chair and seated herself with unhurried grace. "In fact," she added, arranging a single file folder neatly before her, "I never really did." She looked coolly around the table at their stunned, uncomprehending faces. "I am the CEO and founder of Phoenix Capital. I have been since its inception 10 years ago." The impact of her words was visceral. Charlie's jaw literally dropped open. William fumbled the expensive Mont Blanc pen he'd been fiddling with, dropping it with a loud clatter onto the polished table. Beatrice let out a small, strangled gasp, her perfectly manicured hand flying to the pearls at her throat, her mask of socialite composure finally shattering. Arthur Sterling stared, his face suffusing with an alarming mottled purple, as disbelief warred with sputtering, incoherent rage. "Absurd!" Arthur finally roared, slamming his fist onto the table, making the water glasses jump. "Preposterous! You're a research analyst, a glorified secretary. We know where you work, some insignificant data firm." "A carefully maintained and apparently very effective cover," Ellie replied smoothly, seemingly unfazed by his outburst. Her calmness only seemed to fuel his fury. "One you were all too willing to believe, because it fit neatly into your preconceived and frankly outdated notions of my capabilities. You saw exactly what you expected to see." She gestured towards Chloe Jones, who entered the room silently on cue and discreetly connected Ellie's tablet to the large, high-resolution screen at the end of the room. The Phoenix Capital logo appeared, followed by key slides. "Perhaps some data will clarify the situation," Ellie continued, her voice like polished steel. The screen displayed Phoenix Capital's date of incorporation, its current assets under management, a figure comfortably in the 10 figures, followed by impressive 5-year growth charts and the logos of several major, though discreetly anonymized, portfolio companies representing successful turnarounds in diverse sectors. "Phoenix Capital," Ellie narrated coolly, "currently holds controlling debt positions in senior preferred equity in Chentech, following our successful restructuring initiative last year. As stipulated in the financing agreements approved by Chentech's board, our firm's consent," she emphasized the word, "is contractually required for any merger, acquisition, or change of control involving Chentech." She paused, letting the weight of her legal leverage sink in. "We have successfully restructured 12 mid-market companies in the past 5 years alone, delivering an average portfolio IRR exceeding industry benchmarks. Our market influence, particularly in the tech and advanced manufacturing sectors vital to Sterling Industries, is considerable." She turned her gaze directly onto her apoplectic uncle. "Does this look like a joke to you, Uncle Arthur?" William stammered, pointing a trembling finger at the screen. "But the capital? Where did it... How could you..." Ellie cut him off with a look. "Bootstrapped initially," she said dismissively, followed by several rounds of strategic private placements from sophisticated institutional investors and family offices who prioritize results, discretion, and ethical operations over outdated notions of pedigree. Investors who, unlike my own family, recognized potential when they saw it. She signaled Chloe again. The presentation shifted. "Now, regarding Sterling Industries' proposed merger with Chentech," Ellie continued, her tone shifting decisively into negotiation mode. "Phoenix Capital has conducted its own due diligence on the preliminary offer. Frankly, it's inadequate. It fails to reflect Chentech's revitalized market position and significant IP value." Another slide appeared, a concise, brutal SWOT analysis of Sterling Industries itself. It highlighted declining margins in Arthur's legacy manufacturing divisions, pointedly noted the high debt ratios from recent aggressive acquisitions, some successful, some less so, and underscored potential exposure due to pending federal regulations in the aerospace sector. Regulations Phoenix Capital's analysts predicted would heavily impact Sterling's bottom line. "In fact," Ellie added, her voice dropping slightly, adopting a tone of thoughtful analysis, "our internal assessment suggests that Sterling Industries itself presents an interesting investment opportunity. Significant potential for operational improvement, debt restructuring, perhaps even a target for strategic reorganization should current leadership prove resistant to adapting to market realities. The unspoken threat of a hostile takeover, launched by the niece they'd dismissed, hung palpably in the air. Arthur looked as if he might actually have a stroke. However, Ellie brought the focus back, the consummate dealmaker firmly in control. Phoenix Capital might consider approving a substantially revised Chentech merger under the following non-negotiable conditions. The terms flashed onto the screen. A Chentech valuation nearly double Sterling's initial offer, ironclad guarantees of operational autonomy, and R&D funding for David Shen's team post-merger. Stringent environmental and labor compliance covenants applied specifically to the acquiring Sterling division, subject to Phoenix Capital oversight. And finally, a permanent seat on the board of the newly integrated division for a Phoenix Capital designee. These terms, Ellie stated coolly, reflect Chentech's intrinsic value post-restructuring, and ensure its innovative capacity isn't suffocated by Sterling Industries' more traditional management style. She stood up smoothly, gathering her single file folder. You have until 5 p.m. today to communicate your acceptance of these terms in principle via your legal counsel. If we do not have confirmation by that deadline, Phoenix Capital will formally withdraw its consent for any merger involving Chentech, and we will proceed with exploring alternative strategic investments. She gave a brief, almost imperceptible nod towards her stunned, speechless family members. Gentlemen! Beatrice! She turned and walked towards the door, Chloe falling into step silently behind her, leaving the wreckage of the Sterling family's arrogance and disbelief scattered around the massive teak table in her wake. The fallout from the explosive boardroom revelation was immediate and far-reaching. News of the confrontation, Ellie's true identity, and the harsh terms she'd dictated regarding the Chentech merger ricocheted through Sterling Industries and the tight-knit circles of Boston finance before the end of the business day. An emergency meeting of the Sterling Industries board was convened that afternoon. Faced with the undeniable financial clout of Phoenix Capital, the critical strategic importance of the Chentech acquisition for their struggling aerospace division, and the implicit but credible threat of Ellie initiating a hostile takeover or proxy fight if her terms weren't met, the independent directors acted decisively. Overriding Arthur Sterling's furious objections, the board voted overwhelmingly to accept Phoenix Capital's terms in principle just minutes before Ellie's 5 p.m. deadline. Arthur's decades-long autocratic control over the family empire had been irrevocably broken in a single morning. He didn't take the defeat gracefully. Ellie's private line at Phoenix Capital was bombarded with enraged calls from her uncle, alternating between threats about using his remaining influence to ruin her and sputtering demands that she reconsider out of family loyalty. Screened by Chloe, Ellie took only the first call, listening impassively to his tirade before calmly stating, "Uncle Arthur, the business practices you find objectionable are the very ones Sterling Industries has employed for decades. The difference is, my firm applies them ethically and successfully. The time for discussion is over. The terms are non-negotiable." She then instructed Chloe to block his number. Arthur Thorne followed up with a sharply worded cease and desist letter regarding harassment, reminding Arthur Sterling that Ellie now held considerable leverage, legally and financially. Arthur, realizing his usual tactics were useless against Ellie's carefully constructed defenses and Phoenix's resources, retreated into sullen, resentful compliance with the board's decision. The professional consequences for Ellie's cousins were swift. Charlie, whose position had always relied more on nepotism than competence, found his decisions constantly second-guessed under the new oversight structure influenced by the Phoenix Capital board representative. His inability to adapt led to his quiet reassignment to manage a declining legacy division overseas, a gilded exile. William, seeing the writing on the wall and lacking any real desire for the rigorous accountability now demanded, abruptly announced he was taking an indefinite leave of absence to fully focus on completing his law degree, effectively removing himself from the line of succession. Their effortless paths to inherited power had then evaporated. The story inevitably broke publicly, splashing across the pages of the Wall Street Journal, the Boston Globe, and financial news outlets worldwide. Headlines screamed variations of "Secret CEO, How Eleanor Vance Built a PE Empire While Posing as an Analyst," "Sterling Dynasty Rocked by Billion-Dollar Revelation, The Paralegal Who Outplayed Boston's Old Guard." The narrative quickly coalesced around Ellie as a brilliant, underestimated strategist, a feminist icon shattering glass ceilings, and an ethical disruptor challenging entrenched corporate power. Ellie, anticipating the media storm, had preemptively retained a top-tier crisis communications firm recommended by Thorne. Guided by their advice, she maintained control of the narrative. She granted only one carefully chosen interview to a respected international financial publication. In it, she didn't dwell on personal grievances or frame her actions as revenge. Instead, she focused coolly on Phoenix Capital's investment philosophy, identifying the undervalued potential, fostering ethical turnarounds, creating sustainable value, contrasting it implicitly with the short-term, often destructive tactics of traditional conglomerates like Sterling Industries. She became an overnight sensation, enigmatic, powerful, and intensely private, her carefully crafted public statement leaving the media hungry for more, but giving them little personal fodder. Her mother, Catherine Vance, watched the unfolding drama with quiet, profound pride. She visited Ellie at the Phoenix Capital offices, her first time seeing the true scale of her daughter's creation. Tears streamed down her face as she hugged Ellie tightly. "I always knew you were capable of extraordinary things, my darling," Catherine whispered. "Always. Your father would be bursting with pride. You didn't just prove them wrong. You rewrote the rules." It was a moment of pure, unadulterated vindication against the family that had marginalized them both for years. Stepping fully into her public role as CEO of Phoenix Capital was both liberating and demanding. The need for extreme secrecy vanished, allowing Ellie and her team, especially Chloe, an immense sense of relief and increased operational efficiency. Phoenix Capital, its reputation now public and burnished by the Sterling saga, attracted a flood of new investment inquiries and top-tier talent. Ellie found herself in demand, not just as an investor, but as a thought leader. She began accepting select invitations to speak at prestigious business schools and industry conferences, not for personal aggrandizement, but as a platform to advocate for the ethical, sustainable business practices Phoenix championed. Standing on stage where she might once have been an anonymous face in the crowd, commanding the attention of CEOs and academics, she felt the full weight and responsibility of the power she had so patiently, secretly cultivated. The transformation from the invisible niece, the quiet research analyst, to Ellie Vance, the respected and slightly feared head of Phoenix Capital, was complete. 3 more years unfolded, cementing Ellie Vance's position not just as a financial powerhouse, but as a respected voice for change within the often staid world of Boston finance and beyond. Phoenix Capital had grown exponentially, its reputation for resurrecting struggling companies through ethical means, making it a magnet for both impact-focused investors and businesses seeking genuine transformation rather than hostile takeovers. Ellie, once the invisible niece, was now a fixture on industry panels, her insights sought after, her story, though she rarely referenced the personal details publicly, serving as a potent case study in resilience and strategic disruption. Sterling Industries, under the watchful eye of the Phoenix Capital Board representative and the chastened remaining independent directors, continued its path toward stabilization. It was a smaller, less aggressive entity now, forced to focus on operational efficiency and sustainable practices within its core divisions rather than reckless expansion. Charlie and William Sterling had become irrelevant footnotes in the corporate structure, holding minor, non-operational roles overseas, their influence entirely extinguished. Beatrice Sterling dedicated herself exclusively to charitable endeavors, maintaining a polite but distant cordiality towards Ellie during the few occasions their paths crossed at fundraisers. The pinnacle of Ellie's public vindication arrived one crisp autumn evening at the annual New England Business Leadership Awards Gala. Standing on stage, bathed in the warm spotlight, accepting the prestigious Ethical Investor of the Year award, Ellie looked out at the assembled leaders of Boston's corporate world, many of whom had once barely registered her presence at Sterling family events. In her acceptance speech, she spoke not of personal triumph or revenge, but of the principles that drove Phoenix Capital. "True financial success," she stated, her voice clear and resonant, "shouldn't be measured solely by quarterly returns or the scale of acquisitions, but by the enduring value created for employees, for communities, and for a sustainable future. We have a responsibility," she continued, her gaze sweeping the room, "to use capital not merely as a tool for profit extraction, but as a catalyst for positive, ethical, and transformation. That," she concluded, "is the true bottom line, the legacy worth building." In the front row, Catherine Vance watched her daughter, tears of quiet pride glistening in her eyes. Chloe Jones stood beaming beside her. A few weeks later, the final quiet concession from the old guard arrived. Arthur Sterling announced his full retirement from all remaining honorary board positions and advisory roles within Sterling Industries, citing a desire to spend more time with family and pursue personal interests. His official farewell statement, released through the company's PR department, was predictably brief, but contained one carefully worded sentence that spoke volumes. "I acknowledge and support the significant positive shifts in Sterling Industries' strategic direction and its renewed commitment to responsible corporate citizenship over the past several years, driven by fresh perspectives essential for future success." It was the closest Arthur Sterling would ever come to publicly, admitting Ellie had been right, that his era was definitively over. It was a quiet surrender, a footnote signaling the end of his reign. One afternoon, needing a moment away from the relentless demands of running Phoenix Capital, Ellie found herself driving through Cambridge. On impulse, she parked near the old bookstore above which Phoenix had first taken root. The landlord had kept the tiny second-floor office space vacant at her request. She paid the modest rent still, keeping it as a private anchor to her past. She climbed the creaky stairs and unlocked the door. The room was just as she'd left it. Bare walls, a worn desk, a single window overlooking the street. It felt impossibly small, a lifetime away from the sleek headquarters downtown. Standing there, she thought about the young woman who had occupied this space a decade ago, fueled by righteous anger, driven by fierce ambition, meticulously plotting in secret while playing the role of an unremarkable analyst. Had it been revenge that drove her through those long, lonely years? Initially, perhaps the desire to prove them wrong, to shatter their condescending assumptions, had been a powerful motivator. But sitting here now, reflecting on the journey, she realized it had evolved into something far more profound. It wasn't just about tearing down the Sterling way. It was about proving that her way, constructive, ethical, focused on building sustainable value rather than simply acquiring assets, could not only succeed, but prevail. Her legacy wasn't merely the impressive assets under Phoenix Capital's management or her personal wealth. It was the ripple effect. The hundreds of jobs saved in the companies Phoenix had restructured. The shift towards more responsible investing conversations her story had helped spark. The example she set for other women navigating male-dominated industries. It was even reflected in the slow, painful evolution within the remnants of Sterling Industries itself, now forced towards a more accountable path. The greatest vindication, she understood now, wasn't in Arthur's forced retirement or her cousin's irrelevance. It was in the quiet certainty that she had built something meaningful, something lasting, something better, entirely on her own terms, forged not by inherited privilege but by intellect, resilience, and an unwavering ethical compass. The dismissal by her family had defined her. It had inadvertently ignited the spark. Their blindness had been her shield, their arrogance, her ultimate leverage. She locked the door to the small Cambridge office one last time, leaving the physical ghost of her secret past behind but carrying its lessons forward. As she headed back towards the city, towards her life as the visible, respected leader of Phoenix Capital, towards her supportive mother, towards Chloe and her dedicated team, Ellie felt a profound sense of completion. The empire built in the shadows now stood confidently in the light, a testament not just to her strategic brilliance, but to the enduring power of integrity.